ॐ मधुवाताहृतायते मधुक्षरन्ति सिन्धवः माध्वीर्नः सन्तोषधीः मधुनक्तमुतोषसि मधुमत्पार्थिवङ्ग्रजः मधुद्यौरस्तु नः पिता मधुमान्नो वनस्पतिर्मधुमान् अस्तु सूर्यः माध्वीर्गावो भवन्तु नः Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So the word we hear repeatedly in this chanting is madhu, and madhu literally means sweetness, honey, something agreeable, happiness. And in the translation it's been given as happiness, but this is not the happiness that as an emotion, but this is a happiness that at a much more subtler level, because here we are talking of happiness that is coming from all surroundings and nature, happiness from the wind, the river, herbs, the day and night, the dust of the earth, heavens, trees, cattles. This is, you don't go up to all these people and say, give me happiness. So only when you're rooted down to your true nature that you see everything as madhu. Very sweet. And happiness, we just had we are seeing these great courses, and we had these courses on Aristotle. And Aristotle also talked about that we are all seeking happiness. But he made the same point, that this is not a happiness out of as an emotion that, somebody says, oh, Abhijit, you're great, and I feel happy. And then he says, oh, you're no good, and I feel depressed. It's nothing like that. Actually, a friend of mine, maybe a couple of years back, he asked me, what are you up to? What's all these spiritual practices, what is it about? And I said, well, maybe I'm seeking happiness. And he kind of looked at me, and he probably didn't expect that answer. So I said, well, what are you up to? And he said, I want to figure out who this person is. So what we are looking for in spiritual life, of course the paths are different. Sometimes even the end goal apparently seems very different, So we're talking of music today as a spiritual discipline. And music is basically sound, right? Sounds arranged in a certain manner that it appeals to us. But it appeals to a much, should I say, intrinsic, at a very intrinsic level, at a very subtle level. And I'm talking of music where maybe there are no words, like, for example, an instrument. We had this concert a few days back, and I was busy doing the mixing and all that while the concert started, and I was still occupied. And in the midst of all that, I just felt, wow. It just cut through all my, whatever my mind was occupied with, and then I was connected at a much deeper level, and that's what music is about. And then, of course, there is words, right? If I was singing this in Bengali, probably didn't make much sense to you. It's just a bunch of words, but you still get the music part of it. And then, for those who understand the language, the mind then plays and brings about more meaning to that. That's at a different level. So we have music and poetry. Together they combine, and then there's another kind of music. So where are my notes? So I had been people talking to me, hey Abhijit, how is the lecture going to be? Is it that you're going to be doing a lot of singing and doing a demo of how things are going to be? Nothing like that. And somebody asked, oh, did you do a lot of research? You looked into, Harvard has done so much research, right? And did you look into that? No, it's nothing like that. Actually, to me, this topic is very simple. At music, as a spiritual practice, I'd probably be covering different aspects of music and how it relates to spiritual practice. And it's nothing much different from any other spiritual practice, like devotion, knowledge, all other kinds of yoga. This is just another way of connecting with the divine. You can call it music yoga. So recently I bumped onto YouTube. I saw, anybody heard about Emily Bear? She's about 14 years old now, and she has been regarded as a very talented. Comparisons are being drawn with Mozart. She was 2 years old when her grandma was babysitting her, and her grandma herself used to play in a symphony. And she saw that little 2-year-old was actually playing piano. She was playing. She was not playing around. And she saw it's a lot of music involved there. And immediately she said, this girl has to give an attention. And by 4, she had started taking lessons with somebody who specializes in this, teaching talented kids. By 5, she was giving performances, live performances. And before you know, by 8, she had in touch with great names. At age 8, she got introduced to Quincy Jones. I guess you guys know. I didn't know about Quincy Jones, but he's the one who's like the most famous name as a composer, as a organizer, as a producer of music. All the songs of Michael Jackson, Frank Sinatra, and scores of movies song. That's what do you call title music. And what struck me was how these two people, one's 80 years old now, 80 plus, and when this documentary was done, she was 11. And there was a kind of bond between these two, like they were friends. And the interviewer was asking her, when she was 5, there was an interview that they were asking her, where does all this music come from? Because she was composing by that age. She says, I don't know, maybe from the heart. And so whom do you like? She said, I like Mozart. Why? Because I'm kind of like him, and he's kind of like me. So, well, she's a 5-year-old, there's no self-praising here going on. And then she said, and when she's 11, they asked her, what did you get from Quincy Jones? Apart from, by that time, Quincy Jones, he connected her to some famous accompanists, and she's now going about different places, composing And if you see YouTube, you'll see she's phenomenally, and they're all saying she has already kind of fulfilled a lot of promise that they're shown. But about Quincy Jones, she said, he taught me how to be a better person. Yes, what does that mean? He taught me that your music can be as good as the person you are, only as good as the person you are. And it kind of struck when I saw that. I just kind of paused it, and they said, what does that mean? I said, it means that if you are mean and conceited, you cannot make good music. And I found that profound, for a girl, 11-year-old, to appreciate what she heard. Of course, she heard, and to appreciate that you can only be what you are. You cannot be anything more than that in life, wherever you are. If you want to be, you think, okay, I want to do phenomenal things, you can't. You are limited by what you are. Like Sri Ramakrishna used to say, if you have a quart of jar, you can pour as much water as you want, a gallon of water in there, it'll still be a quart of water. And if you look at these people, they did phenomenal things just because they were enormous people. And spiritual practice, I think, to me, is to expand yourself, to be a bigger person than who you are. Whether it's, whatever form of spirituality you're practicing, it ultimately comes down to a lot of attributes, some of which we are going to talk about. I mean, we're talking of music today. And, being in the Ramakrishna order and following the life of Sri Ramakrishna and Vivekananda, there are so much examples. Sri Ramakrishna, he had, music was very much a part of his life. You could go to him and he will just catch hold of you, sing a song, if you were to be there. And if you said, oh, I don't know, I don't sing, he said, you didn't take that for an answer. He said, no, you can sing. There's no shame, just come on, sing. And he himself was so not conceited. So, I wanted to read some parts of it here. This is an interview with Hriday. This is a long time later. I'm reading the great master, Sri Ramakrishna, the great master. We have heard from Hriday that the worship by the master was an act worth witnessing. Whoever saw it became charmed. Oh, the songs sung by the master in his sweet voice, with his heart swelling with emotion. Whoever heard those songs could never forget them. There was in them nothing of the artificiality of the so-called masters of high class. Their only merits were the complete identification of himself with the emotion of the song, an accurate expression of the same in a sweet voice touching the heart, and the correctness of time and cadence. So, the identification with the song, that is such a big part of singing. That what's one thing. Song as such can be yoga, cannot be yoga. Song is something that attracts us, true, but that doesn't mean it's a spiritual. It's helping you spiritually. Song actually could be there are many traditions where singing is not allowed. At least some part of the history. For example, here in the Puritans, they were at some point not singing was not allowed, or especially should I say the playing of instruments were not allowed. And the reason was that you cannot have fun. It's that they consider it having fun as enjoyment. And in Islamic traditions also, there are many conservative or interpretation of Islam where they don't allow music. Music is prohibited. Like when the Taliban came in Afghanistan, they made sure nobody's turning on their TV, no music is going on, and they were. And there is some merit to that, because it can take away your mind outward, and I can completely identify with that. As a child, I just grew up with all kinds of music. I didn't half the time understood the meaning of them. Even if I didn't know the meaning, I would just sing them out. But after so many years and decades since I have sung the song, and suddenly, in particular mood, it just pops up. All kinds of it depends on the kind of mood. It just pops up. So. I was talking about identifying with the song. There was once Anthony Hopkins. He was doing a movie on. He was taking the role of a sick person, and having done the movie, he actually fell sick. And then he was in the opera show, and Oprah Winfrey, she asked him, like, what do you think? Why do you think you fell sick? And he said, I think because my body didn't know that it was acting that was going on. My being didn't know that I was acting. It thought it for real, and it fell sick. So when we are actually taking up a song, we are actually in some ways acting, and should I say more than acting, it should be much more than acting. It's complete identification. And then we heard that Sri Ramakrishna used to forget himself. And of course, he used to forget himself in any spiritual practice, and that's phenomenal. I was for the Ramakrishna Sankirtanam, I was doing the translation, and I did the translation, and then I started revising it, and then as I was going through a couple of paragraphs, it says, when practicing when worshipping Sri Rama, you forgot yourself and became Hanuman. When worshipping Krishna, you forgot yourself and became Radha. And as I was reading it, it just was overwhelming to me, just reading my own translations at that point of time. And that's for a while. I mean, how often does it happen that we forget ourselves? Sometimes we may get engrossed in something and forget ourselves for a while. But, Sri Ramakrishna completely forgot himself. He probably forgot who he was, where he came from. When he took up his practice and became Hanuman, his gaze changed. He started behaving like an animal, like a monkey, and he'd go up this. And actually, it's so hard to believe. He developed a small tail. His tailbone became bigger. I mean, that's the level of identification that Sri Ramakrishna could identify himself with the song. Every time you'd see that he's totally engrossed into being that. And I think as spiritual practice, it's important that we try to identify ourselves with the song. Sometimes when you are singing a Meera song, it's a unique opportunity to become Mirabai, you know, or singing a Ram Prasad song, to become. I mean, that's also holy company. That's as close as you can ever become, to any saint, you know. When you completely, singing a song, for example, say of Kabir, and then you are saying to people, life is, we are losing our, life. There's not time's passing out, as kid, we just played around. As adults, we, got vexed with all desires, and then old age, we are trembling, and then, oh, devotee, when are you going to take the name of the Lord? You become Kabir, and you can actually say that to people, and people will take that from you, because they are also identifying with you. That takes you, that transcends you, even for some time, and it happens, we experience that. Swami tells, like, even during the lecture, people come up to him and said, Swami, I'm changed. That changes, he says, once you go out. But even for that moment, it brings you to a raised spiritual level, and that makes an impression in your psyche, and then over and over, that impression, like japa or anything else, it has phenomenal effect on. So when we take up a song, whether we are singing or hearing, I think it makes a phenomenal difference if you can identify it. And people, and another thing that Thakur used to say, that you have to be not, don't be ashamed, or what's the right word, to express yourself, because that's, sometimes you may be, singing as though you are, Radha is talking to Krishna, right? And then that's a very, you wouldn't do that, like if you were to talk to your spouse, you don't want to expose yourself to that feeling to the people around. But Sri Ramakrishna said, no, you should just completely lose yourself. That any spiritual practice, recently a Swami came and he said, the purpose of any spiritual practice is to forget ourselves in the spiritual practice. Is, that's when we lose our identity and we merge with our spiritual practice. Now, music is, I guess, it's not just devotional, all kinds of music. It could be, if you listen to music by Kabir and all that, they are all non-dualistic, full of knowledge. And then there are some poems that probably Sri Ramakrishna also sang. They are as though somebody is describing their, Kundalini rising and all that. It's interesting because Totapuri, he spent some time with Sri Ramakrishna, and they had a very nice relationship. And Sri Ramakrishna once was singing a song to him, and then, of course, he's dancing to his tune, clapping, and Totapuri, of course, he's not much into devotion and all that. He's looking and saying, what's going on here? Huh? Are you making tortillas? Flipping? Because, usually we roll the tortillas, but out there, it's like a pizza dough, you just flap. And then he says, get out, you punk, I'm just doing, this is not, I'm singing this to Holy Mother. But even Totapuri, there were times when Sri Ramakrishna would sing a song, and he didn't know Bengali at all. He was from Punjab, and then he would be shedding tears listening to his songs. So, negativity always comes up in some form or the other. Even singing, if you, I'll give you an example. I was talking to a musician out here. He's an accompanist, a famous one. And then Swamiji was asking about a sitar player who was very famous at some point. And he said, yeah, he was very good, but he fizzled out. And Swamiji said, no, he was very good. He said, yeah, he was very good. But the problem was he had a nice job, and he didn't need this music. So he was very rough and arrogant. He wouldn't care, take it or leave it kind of attitude with the organizers and everything. And the other thing was that he was saying that he wasn't from a musical family. What he was concentrating was playing the music fast. He would build the tempo very fast, and everybody would come to a high and clap. But that kind of music is very easy to forget. The next day, people will forget what was that about. And then very soon the competitors came who, apart from being nice to all these organizers, and they were actually focusing on creating nice music, music aesthetically appealing, where you hear and you think, you remember it next day. The other thing he was saying, that he starts focusing on his music after midnight. And I said, why after midnight? He said, well, everything quiets down, there is no disturbance. But I said, but then you're a percussion player. You'll create a lot of disturbance yourself. He said, no, but music is not just playing. There's one part of the music is where you keep yourself up to shape, and then, but you have to be creative. And then when you're creative, and you have to think. You have to keep thinking about, because the main player whom you're accompanying, he's also thinking, you are also thinking. And then when the performance comes, you kind of meet at tandem. Otherwise, you will keep lagging behind. And then I said, okay, you're saying you're thinking, but is it you're thinking, or the music is just flowing in your mind? And then his eyes shined, He said, yes, music plays in the mind. It's not that you're thinking, that music is coming to you. Music has grabbed you more than you grabbing the music. And that, at some point, that has to happen. Where it happens to me, like sometimes a song just gets hold of me, and I know that now, whether I practice or I don't, this music is going to be spontaneous. And there was this, I was reading a commentary by Swami Ranganathananda, and he was saying the same thing, that Tulsidas is saying, that, what's the point in me saying, O Rama, when Rama says, O Tulsi, then something's going on. So there has to be spontaneity, of course, but that to get to that point, you have to practice. Like any spiritual discipline. Same is true with music, that you have to put a lot of practice up until the point where your practice takes over you, and then it's kind of spontaneous. We sing arati every night, and it's very stylized, very, the script is all laid out, and you do it over and over and again. At some point, then maybe you get over it. Even we do puja every day. Again, the same thing. It's a very stylized ritual. Like I'm cleaning myself, offering flowers. But there is so in music, that's very important, that you put your work, you practice. And Sri Ramakrishna would say, he would not take it kindly, if you miss a beat here and there and you're sloppy with your notes. He was very, very particular that you have to get it right, otherwise it's not done. The other thing I find very interesting in Sri Ramakrishna's life in particular is what role, how much of music was important in his life. There were many times people will come up to him and ask, very same questions that we get asked here all the time, how to develop devotion for God, how to get love for God. And then you'd say, you pray to God, you take His name and you sing, and then He'll sing out a song. And then the person would take it, oh yeah, that's how it is. Often it was, in many cases it's like that people come and ask questions and he just said, okay, listen to this song. By the time he's done with the song, he's kind of elaborating, and then he'll say, okay, listen to this song too. And then the guy will say, you explained it so nicely, it's all clear to me now. But all he did was he sang a couple of songs. And somehow he made it easy. It seemed so easy. One time he says to Swami Akhandananda, like he was a young teenager, I guess, at that point of time. He says, how to practice, how to pray? How to pray? He said, how? You just say, oh mother, I don't want anything. I don't want wealth. I don't want family. I want you. I want nothing else. And tears starts flowing. And before you know, he goes into samadhi. So within minutes, he could show you and maybe I can read a little bit more from There was another reason why Master's songs were so sweet. He became so absorbed in the emotion of the song at the time of singing that he forgot altogether that he was singing it to please anyone. We have not seen in our life anyone else singing a song and becoming so absorbed in the emotion as to lose himself completely like the master. Even devotional singers expect a little, at least, of praise from their hearers. But it was in the case of Master alone we saw that whenever anyone praised his song, he actually felt the praise was due to the emotion of the song and not at all to himself. I think it's a hard thing to say, you know. I mean, that I'm not going to have any desire to be appreciated. I mean, that's ingrained in our singing. But it's the path, you know. As you make progress, it's the music is the soul of the music is what is important. The ego cannot be out there. You know, it's you know, oftentimes it's noticeable that people start singing, and then once they come to an intricate part, and then they suddenly open up their eyes and see if they're being appreciated or not. And Sri Ramakrishna kind of makes a parallel here, that he says there are people who would be listening to music and or be in a kind of trance with their tears in their eyes, and then the rajas is there. They will look around and see if they are being observed. You know, that's very much ingrained. But with worship, you know, as I said, every time it's you take part in a song, in music, you transcend yourself even a little bit, and over the time you do transcend it. You know, as you make spiritually people progress, you know, one thing about singing or taking part in music is you kind of become vulnerable in some sense, and you open up, and people, great people, saints, they can actually see through you much easier at that point of time. Mathur Babu, he was the kind of the owner of the temple that Sri Ramakrishna was in, and he organized a big gathering, and huge festival was going on, and lot of musicians were brought in, and he was doling out rewards. So, and he said to Thakur, how did this guy do? How did this guy do? And Sri Ramakrishna would evaluate that, yes, this guy has devotion, and then accordingly he would reward the people. So it's we were, like, a Swami came here, and he was describing an incident from his life. Like, when he joined, he was in Belur Math, they were all brahmacharis. And at that time, whoever the secretary was, he became president later on, the Swami. He would do that. Like, there's a gathering of young brahmacharis, he would say, come here, sing. And of course, he would not take no for an answer. He'll say, whatever you sing, just sing. And then he said, then he would stare at like this, watch. And he said, I didn't know why he would do that. Among them, there was one brahmachari who was particularly very devoted, and he would go into ecstasies. And tears would come out of him, and then and this Swami said, I used to be jealous of that guy. How come I don't have this kind of devotion? He has so nice devotion and everything. And then one day that Swami said, okay, come sing. And then after he was done, he said, pack up and leave. And it was, people were shocked. What's going on? And it turned out that he was not a good person at all. He was kind of running away from the society and taking shelter in there, and it was all acting going on. So in music has that, it kind of opens you up in a way that it's easy to read you, and I guess saints can look into it much easier. So we have, in case you have some comments, I'll take them, or any questions. Yes. Yes, so it turned out that Swami was he was not an immoral person who was kind of running away from the society. Maybe the cops were after him, and
No, I was confused as to who it was assassinated. It was the person that was, everyone thought
he was a much elevated soul, but it was all yes. Yes, please. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, actually, true. Song also, like I was talking initially, that song is like, of the five elements, the sound is supposed to be a very subtle, it's the subtle most. So when creation happens, creation, when you are coming out of sleep, maybe that's or from deep sleep, when you're coming out, that's a stage where you can think of how as the consciousness comes and particular happens, the sound is supposed to be the most subtle. And I have heard of people making, because the way musicians elaborate on a particular piece, they start with one note, and then slowly, as they build on, and these sounds are not random sounds. They if you notice, there'll be like a pattern, and slowly it just elaborates into a big piece which can go on for a good few hours. So harmonics, yes, 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 exactly. Yes.
It's interesting when you were saying, all the subtleties of the music, spirituality, it's very old traditions of American Indian, doing the rain songs, the dances,
Uh,
and there are lots of other traditional, many cultures, traditional kinds of ways that vibrations are expressed
in a song.
in the song.
Uh huh.
And I wondered what the connection is
With the mind, how uh, how a song can relates to a particular a mood relates to a, yeah, well I'm not an expert into that, but definitely in the Indian classical music, it's very, all we have what's called ragas, which are basically uh, they denote moods, and these ragas could denote, you know, different seasons, times of the day. But it's a much more intricate science than than I have the expertise to talk about. Yeah.
Well, Krishna's music, again, they studied about things, he studies what's called Krishna music.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them I thought would do was the study of the broken hands in this way. And definitely a whole another study
Yes.
of harmony.
Yes, Les. Like I said initially, like the music is at a much more subtler level, so you can connect. Like we did the initial uh, chanting. Like there is a connection between nature, all your surroundings, and that connection is at a very subtle level. So um, definitely, I mean the sages who wrote that, those rishis who wrote those verses, of course they could see that madhu, that, you know, the sweetness, the bliss, you can say, that exists everywhere. We don't see that. That's why it's a prayer to us. It's like a prayer.